update for our EB5 investments. We wanted to get together and introduce some of the progress and everything that we've been working for on the RISE fund. We have made significant strides in construction, in subscriptions, in completions, in rent and cash flow. There's kind of a lot to talk about, so we thought we'd just hop on a webinar and just kind of give the general updates. I'm joined by Peter Bibler, our partner and managing director of the EB5 platform and real estate. So, we are going to plow through this fairly quick. Again, this is an interactive webinar, so you're able to use the chat desk to pose questions. We're going to collect things, and at the very end, we'll definitely go through a Q&A session. So please be patient as we just make our way through the slide deck. Our team, Kyle, Greg, everyone else is on the back end also watching the chats. So we'll answer some of them in the process, and then the other ones we'll get to at the very end. So please use the chat desk to pose questions, and feel free to ask. But we'll just kind of give you guys the soft updates and then have a chance to chat thereafter. So again, the RISE Fund, as you all know, it's a 14 asset portfolio, many of them under construction, lots of jobs being created, and doing a great job here on progress. And we're happy to report on that today. But 6 of these projects have already been completed, over 856 jobs already banked, covering every single investor that is already invested in the fund to a certain extent with the assets that are under construction as we speak. There's significant equity in the deals, as we all know, and making great progress. Job creation-wise, thousands of jobs already accomplished. And, with this fund in total, going to, reach kind of the same number that we've had on previous deals, on its way to 3,000 jobs when all of the assets are fully complete. As of today, we're about 850 plus. And with the 3 deals under construction, we'll be tipping that 1,000 job mark here probably very, very early in the year. So looking at this on the go-forward basis, one of the biggest updates here with the USCIS approvals that have come through recently. Peter's going to touch on this in the USCIS side of this at the very end, but we have the 956F approved for the project. We have again had source of fund approvals on almost every single category in our toolbox, whether it happens to be partial capital contributions, self-directed IRAs, the Unity lender loan profiles have been approved. Crypto as a source of funds was approved. And then all 3 of our different investment profiles, whether it's the legacy fund with the common units, preferred units, and or the debt style investments, all 3 of them have been approved by USCIS. So huge strides there. And then also, I'll leave it for Peter at the end, but huge progress on the mandamus actions that have been filed by investors as of late. And that'll be something to talk about as well. Recapping, the main benefits of RISE and like why this is different, and then how we're seeing that play out in the progress of the fund. Diversification, having 14 different assets, smaller, quick to build, simple construction with great protection and guarantees and a large amount of equity securing the loans. We are seeing that play out in real time as now 6 assets are complete and cash flowing and effectively totally locked in on their development risk, and now just being marketed, leased up in general operations. 2 of those assets have actually already realized stabilized occupancy, totally full. The other 4 in their initial lease ups as they just recently completed construction. And again, having the construction risk out of the way, cash flow in place, being on its way to stabilize or stabilize already, that is as good as it gets from a development risk perspective compared to having a very, very large, long-tailed single asset project, all your eggs in one basket, total risk on one deal. One thing stops construction, one thing goes wrong, and those projects are totally stopped. RISE is the complete opposite of that. Risk taken care of on 6 assets for construction. The other one's also under the same construction story. We expect to have those complete within a year to 15 months on all of the deals that are under construction and moving forward. As far as the markets that we're in, today we're currently constructing the Berkeley assets, the UC Berkeley student housing focused deals. We've all been waiting patiently to see those go up. Everyone loves UC Berkeley. That market is effectively bulletproof, as the more students that UC Berkeley wants to admit, housing gets full. And there's an insatiable demand to attend UC Berkeley. So it has been probably decades since Berkeley has ever seen oversupply. Looking at this, the summary of how we've accomplished a lot of progress here. Top 6 deals across top row, all complete. These are deals that we can't even tour anymore because some of them are completely full. And if you want to see some of the Rise assets and the product in person, there's only a couple units left on the last 3 deals. And then the under construction projects that I just mentioned in Berkeley, in Telegraph, MacArthur, Dwight. And then in 2025, we have a whole lineup of the last 5 assets and a whole bunch of job creation and a whole bunch of capacity down there. But very exciting, good progress. Again, 6 assets on the shelf. You couldn't ask for more from really from an EB5 project, because I've never seen a mutual fund style approach from any other regional center where we're able to diversify, stagger out the schedules, put risk away, and then admit investors into nearly completed deals on the shelf, cash flowing, and with that security in place. So we're showing the growth here. Every single month, we're growing in revenue as the buildings start to lease up. They start to get fully occupied. And the 2 charts are just showing monthly revenue because the deals are just recently completed. And then the breakdown on a per asset basis, the 3 assets that have been operating here for the last couple of months, just kind of showing how they're contributing more and more to that NOI as things go on. In another year, you're going to see 6 assets, 9 assets, and then you'll start seeing a very large number with a whole lot of contribution and diversification. And we'll just track this as we go. Rise, because of this diversification and this multi-asset strategy, a lot of investors ask, okay, well, you have 14 deals, 11 of them are on the EB5 side and job creating and everything else. So do I have to, kind of wait to the end? And do I have to wait for every deal to be done? And the truth is you don't. And this multi-asset strategy actually offers multiple ways to enter and exit in different timings, staggered approach, not only on the construction, but staggered on the EB5 investors side. EB5 investors all have their own independent timelines. Some are coming very, very fast and very early. Others are on partial capital contributions, investing over time. They need more time in a later project in order to get their job creation. Rise allows us that flexibility to enter and exit at multiple different points flexibly for those investors. And no matter what, there's alternative capital in place to fill any gap if there wasn't an EB5 investor on that exact month that we needed to place. So in any event, diversified across the board. The staggered construction schedules, very, very helpful, being able to have smaller projects spread over time, giving us that flexibility in bite-sized chunks. You never have balloon payments of 100 million needing to go out, 100 million getting repaid, having to deal with huge numbers that can be a little bit of risk or extra management and or hard to place quickly and maintain the risk. So the last thing that's most important to understand on all this, no matter what happens, there's a umbrella corporate guarantee across the board, across all assets. So from a loan perspective, the first thing that you'd want to look to is just the quality of the asset and the equity in the individual deal. If that wasn't enough to obtain full repayment, you then could look toward the corporate guarantee, which then that big bucket of money that owns all the deals, those equity shareholders would then pledge their equity interest, their ownership, their shares per se, would be your security for that loan. So to have the security of 14 assets and 11 of those EB5 and everything else, securing your loan positions, that's more security than you're going to find with other debt style deals that are out there on the market. So compare apples to apples and you'll really see how Rise outperforms. Then handing this over to Peter, wanting to talk in depth about the mandamus actions, the USCIS approvals, and then we'll get to the Q&A for everybody because that's what you're really here for. So Peter, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight one other thing that really makes Rise interesting compared to other projects out there, especially like Colin said, where all your eggs are in one basket in one large scale asset, is that because of this, the being the construction, the phase, and the diversification, what Colin was referring to, that equity ownership interest that's pledged as collateral for the loan, that's that equity, that minimum 25% equity in the deal that the developer funds into the project. But as these projects complete and stabilize earlier on, that the risk of the project starts de-risking very earlier on in the investment cycle for the investors, and the equity value of the projects as they're completed and renting increases. So that value of the equity increases, which further de-risks that EB5 loan. And I think that's something special about this phased approach with RISE. It's been an exciting quarter, to say the least, for Q3. Not least of which, just to remind folks that may be new to RISE and new to Behring. So, thank you for joining. And just to reiterate for those who are, coming back to learn more about RISE, in Q3, we did have the 956F approved by USCIS for the RISE project. And if you're not familiar with 956F approval, essentially what it is that we're getting pre-approval from USCIS that this project is compliant, the business plan is credible, the job creation methodology is approved by USCIS. And the practical impact of that is that when you file your own I-526 petition to USCIS, they don't need to look at the project anymore, because they will acknowledge and defer to the 956F approval of the project. And that means USCIS just needs only to review your source of funds report, where the lawful source of your $800,000, which is what your immigration lawyer will help you document and provide as part of that petition. So this checks a significant box, as part of your due diligence when selecting projects out there, to go into a project knowing not only is it's already under construction, not only creating jobs, but it's already been approved by USCIS. So you can control that aspect of it, and the next aspect you can control, which is your source of funds. In other news in this quarter, we've had just a reinforcement of the successful strategy of the mandamus. We've had groups of investors. Most recently, we had a group of 18 investors in one of our projects collectively file a mandamus action. And within about 35 days, they were starting to get approvals directly from USCIS. And with that success, I've learned from the law firm KLD that another group of investors have now pooled together. I think another 15 to 18 investors are now likewise preparing to file another mandamus action. So just stepping back a bit, make sure that folks understand the mandamus action really is a lawsuit. It's a federal lawsuit. You're suing USCIS in federal court, and basically you're complaining to the court that USCIS is taking too long, the delay in processing your petition. Now, practically speaking, this doesn't really get to court very rarely. It's all done usually after you file. Usually the lawyer for USCIS contacts your immigration lawyer, and there's a discussion of the situation. And very often, USCIS on its own accord will start processing your petitions very quickly. And that's why we've been getting, dozens of approvals lately because of these strategies. It'll be if you're interested, I do recommend you just feel free to contact us. We can put you in touch with lawyers that are experienced in this, so you can have a consultation to see if it makes sense for you. Usually the lawyers will probably suggest that you wait a minimum period of time after you file before considering filing a mandamus action. That's stage one, but also we've had investors at stage 3 for the permanent green card, the I-829, successfully use the mandamus strategy to get the permanent green card approved in as quickly as 7-8 months. So it can be an effective strategy when used appropriately. And so this is something going forward. You know, we'll have to wait and see like how processing times go forward. Organically, processing times have been faster. I mean, to give credit to USCIS where it's due, we have seen faster approvals than before the Reform and Integrity Act. The 2019, 2000, that era. Um, Processing times have been faster. We've had people approved as quickly as 8 months. But going forward, we have to wait and see. And so this could be an effective tool in the toolbox for you. But one of the things that these mandamus actions have achieved for us is expedited review and approval of some of Behring's signature strategies that are available for EB5 investors. One is our Unity lender loans. So Unity Lender is a separate company. It's a licensed California lending company that can provide unsecured loans to qualified EB5 borrowers up to $300,000. So it's more designed to bridge gaps to reach that $800,000 level, required investment level. Where recently USCIS is starting approving this funding strategy as a source of your $800,000, a source of your funds. And these were approved without any RFE. So we knew we did it right, and that's the approach that we always take, is make sure any new tool or innovation that we do, whether that's multiple investment options, debt style, preferred equity, common equity, blended investments, partial payment plans, portfolio loan approaches with multiple assets like RISE. We set them up to offer innovative strategies and options that for EB5 investors, where in the industry where options are actually very few, and we do that carefully, soundly, with the eye toward approval. It's easier for me to say that. It's obviously better for you to see that's the actual evidence of that, and so this is exciting to have that more recently. Additionally, we have a relatively recent strategy in the past 1 to 2 years that has become an option for US-based investors, and that is to efficiently use your IRA or a former employer 401k account and rolling these over into a self-directed IRA that you can choose to invest into the EB5 project. So usually you're limited, with these funds, 401ks and IRAs. If you take a loan against them, it's only for a limited amount. If you cash them out, then you're going to suffer tax penalties. And so a rollover allows you to more efficiently use 100% of those funds and put them into an EB5 project. And so this has been an effective strategy, and this has received multiple approvals in the past month without any RFE as well by USCIS. So this is a key tool that many people take advantage of. And again, I should, it's not mentioned here as a slide, but underlying all of this is one of the oldest tools that we've had in our toolkit. And we were the first regional center to offer this, starting, I believe, in 2016. We've done it several hundred times. It's been approved many, many times now. It's now become an industry standard of a partial payment plan. And the installment plan has been repeatedly approved as long as it's structured appropriately and done well. And so it's not merely a deposit. It's not merely a contingency plan. It's something that you carefully craft and draft with your immigration lawyer and demonstrate a commitment to the project. You can, in fact, file your investment with less than $800,000 with an installment plan in place. And that's been repeatedly approved by USCIS. And the reason that we can do that is that we can, as Colin said, the construction is already in place and being phased in construction. And we have alternative sources of financing, a bridge financing, to make sure the construction continues as scheduled. And the EB5 can come in. We can be more flexible for the EB5 funding to come in. And so that along with these other tools, many investors have taken advantage of to give them a little bit more flexibility, give you a little more flexibility on how to plan your finances, maybe for tax efficiency purposes, 2024 tax year, 2025 tax year, or overseas capital transfer restrictions. Usually, certain countries will have annual limits to transfer capital out, and so you can straddle the fiscal years to transfer. And so these are usually the original reasons for people desiring a partial payment plan or installment plan, and we've been able to accommodate that with success.
Yeah, and
Um,
let's hit on that more. So, we're here in the middle of November, which means that you have about 6 weeks in the rest of this year. And, right in December, everything's going to get a little crazy with holidays and people starting to disappear for work reasons, personal reasons, everything else. But this is the time for that end of year planning, not just on taxes, but on actually securing capital. And when you're deciding to make an EB5 investment, what Peter's mentioning about capital controls, if you are limited to something like $250,000 a year to be able to get that out of India or whatever country, there are a lot of different countries with different policies. You need to start planning that now, because when you get into December, things are going to get a little crazy. You're going to run out of time in the last week of December. Instead of being a very relaxed vacation-oriented week for most of the world, it turns into a lot of scrambling. Talking about RSUs, talking about stocks, wanting to split up capital gains, long-term, short-term, the capital transfers for capital restricted countries. This is that period where all of this takes place. Partial capital contributions, what Peter talked about. If you're putting those minimum contributions that are allowed by projects like ours, doing that and freeing up that capital now at the end of this fiscal year, filing early next year, and then trying to stretch a partial into the following year, you can do some pretty significant planning. And the tax hits on those, if it's $800,000 that you're trying to free up, and if you're able to save 10, 15, 20% on taxes, those are six-figure numbers. It's over $100,000, $150,000 that because of better tax planning or better planning in general, you might be able to save money and or obtain more US dollars from a foreign country based on those decisions. So, obviously we're not your tax attorneys. We're not your tax accountants. We're not your advisors in those regards, but it doesn't mean we don't know how it works. And we're happy to speak to various different strategies and things you can do for EB5. But, again, like we are in that golden hour where you are 6 weeks out at the end of the year, and a lot of that planning really should take place now.
And we can, if you do need references to
Yep.
attorneys, of course, but also tax advisors, we're able to do that as well.
Okay. What do we got next year, Peter?
Looking towards 2025. This is going to be an interesting year in many ways.
Yeah, so 2025, the RISE projects themselves are really kind of on cruise control. We've got 3 deals under construction, the UC Berkeley student housing deals, Dwight, Telegraph. We got the project at MacArthur, fully framed, things rising fast. These type 3, type 5 construction, they're wood frame apartments. They go pretty quick. So that's why we've been able to see 6 projects get finished, put on a shelf, cash flowing, 3 more deals up and on their way. The projects are just going to keep continuing doing what they're doing through 2025. I think we have 1 project that will probably complete in 2025, and the rest of them are fairly large. They'll continue their constructions throughout the year. We are expecting interest rates to probably reduce further throughout the year 2025. Obviously, we just had elections, and there's a lot of different things that we're trying to get a hold of, and everyone get their bearings on what the new administration is going to look like. But for all intents and purposes, it is expected that we are in a rate reduction environment that will play into construction, that'll play into the cost of capital, that will probably reiterate into property markets. And that's typically a favorable scenario versus a rate rising environment. The Oakland elections, Alameda County, definitely had some changes. Oakland elections definitely had some changes. all of them seen as positive for the real estate industry, property as a whole, public safety, tax base, everything else to go through it. We can talk about that stuff in more detail, but they are changes. And then supply and demand. Supply is going to heavily dwindle on new units, and building permits are down, available units are down. There is going to be a supply crunch, which means rent rates will go up. Rent rates going up are typically an increase almost 100% of the bottom line, because anything after operating expenses, any extra rent at all, is pure profit. So to have that glut of supply that the Bay Area was able to build, and the East Bay particularly able to build over the early generation cycle pre-COVID, that 10 to 14,000 units that was under construction, that is about gone now. So with that supply out of the way, you're definitely going to be in a rate rising environment, leading also into return to work mandates, return to office, where you're seeing all of the big players, whether it's Salesforce, Amazon, Microsoft, everybody has announced at least a 3-day a week and some a 5-day a week office culture going into San Francisco, East Bay, everything else. We are already seeing traffic starting to line up to numbers that were pre-pandemic, especially on the roads in the East Bay, and then BART ridership now leveling off and taking its turn upward as well. That it has to be completely attributed to the return to office and the repopulation of our urban cores. So that Bay Area supply drought, that's going to be seen as a massive tailwind, because even if all of that return to work and return to office and the AI binge that's taking place here and the job creation that comes with it, very high paying jobs, first of all, that economic growth, it's going to take years for people to have that light bulb flash, decide they want to build more apartments, join the fray, get permits, get built, deliver, and then have new supply on the road. You're looking at maybe 2027 for those numbers to show up. In the meantime, anyone that has apartments and that completes apartments, they are going to see rents rise. And that is good for everybody investing on the construction side of multifamily housing, student housing, and the like. So 2025 is going to be a turning point and a major inflection point where we start seeing the the fear and or the uncertainty of where property markets lie. 2025 is going to be a year where it starts looking like the J curve, and things start moving up and to the right pretty violently toward the end of the year. 2026 is expected to be a banner year. 2027 is when you start to see new projects really fire up in earnest. So that's kind of like the short end of what we think on the look ahead here for multifamily in the San Francisco Bay Area. So talking about reasons why we're starting to see upticks in investment for EB5 and definitely for the RISE fund, you could probably attribute a lot of the major rush that we've seen ever since the I-526 filings, but the 956F approval, the Unity lender approvals, SDIRA approvals, we have been validated across the board with every tool in the toolbox as well as the fund. So in the very beginning, when we launched this fund, our competitors and anyone who didn't understand us, they would like to say things like, oh, it's multi-asset. Oh, it's got a lot of different moving parts. Oh, it's, there's lots of TEA letters, whatever it is. But we have been approved on every single petition we filed for that. So 100% approvals across the board, partials, all the source of funds elements, everything approved. So when everybody sees that validation really start to hit, really toward July, August, and so on, we're starting to see our available petitions and our capacity drop where we are filling up. We are probably in the last quarter of our RISE fund until it will sell out. And, we are starting to see that velocity really start to increase. And especially towards the end of the year when people are starting to make those long-term investment decisions, freeing up capital, wanting to get that partial capital contribution in, get the EAD and advanced parole for those that are concurrently filing, and just kind of get themselves on a cruise control path to solving immigration over the long term. So at the paces that we're raising capital right now on the 20 odd spots that are left, we're looking probably, Q1 of 2025 is probably the last that we're going to have availability for this tranche for RISE. But looking at, the other items past this, I mean, moral of the story is we're running out of spots. We've done a great job getting these assets built, proving the concept, getting all the approvals. And now with seeing stabilized cash flow from these apartments, there's not a lot of questions left on what project you should pick. And at this point, anybody not picking Rise, would have a hard time justifying why they wouldn't when all the boxes are checked here for this project. So any comments or questions on that, Peter?
On that, no, I think that you're hitting on the head.
Okay. Talking about virtual tours, also our EB5 consultations, many of you have spoken with the team before, with Peter, Greg, Matt, Kyle, Nick, everybody that has been working on the immigration side, working hard here. But if you haven't spoken to us before, or you were passed this information from somebody else, feel free to book consultations, get those times on calendar, talk about your personal scenario, go through source of funds strategies and things of that nature, get the updates in real time, access to the document vaults. We're happy to help here. And you can just use these QR codes in order to book and also to figure out timing. We can help with every aspect of the deal. But now talking about Q&A and going through, we got a bunch of good questions here that we can start with. Peter, is there any particular one that you'd like to start with?
Well, I see one here. It just says, when do the RISE TEA approvals expire? Target employment qualification expire, and what happens if it's no longer eligible at the time of filing? So that's a good question. TEA is based TEA eligibility, which means for you as an investor that the investment level is 800,000 instead of 1,050,000. And it puts you also in the reserved visa line instead of the unreserved visa line. Is determined at time of filing your petition. Now, TEA under the new law, the TEA status is valid for a 2-year period from the time of filing the 956F project pre-approval form with USCIS. And so for this project, the TEA would not, the TEA letters, evidence of TEA status would not expire until end of November 2025 at the earliest. So this project will be long fully subscribed before that time. So there's no issue of any or risk of TEA expiration. And again, it's TEA status at the time of filing. So 2 years, down the road, you have a green card or you're getting a green card and the project's no longer a TEA, that's okay. When in fact, that means we've done our job to contribute to economic stimulus into the community. That's the whole goal of EB5. So these projects, over time, you should no longer qualify for TEA because they've been built and brought stimulus to the community. But for all intents and purposes, for everybody, considering RISE here, this will be fully TEA eligibility through November 2025, and this project will be fully subscribed by January, February, Q1 2025. So that's not going to be an issue for you.
Okay. Looking at another question here, talking about the terms of RISE and being in the debt fund, when you're looking at the term of a 3-year loan, and then there's extensions if needed of 2 single 1-year consecutive extensions in the event that it's needed and accretive for the lender, which is us, the fund. Talking about what's the probability of getting the money back after year 3 versus year 4 versus year 5. The easiest way to describe this is in years 3, 4, and 5, the probability of getting your money back is high, higher, and highest for 3, 4, and 5, respectively. What I mean by that is that you have a high chance of getting repaid after year 3. Why? Low risk projects, smaller, faster construction, that's common construction, and you already have a huge head start On the 3-year timeline, 6 deals are done, 3 more under construction, and you only have the latter half, which you don't need in order to get repaid. You don't need it for your job creation. You don't need it for your sustainment period. All of those things in the future are actually not critical to the 3-year filer getting from the earlier portions of the project. And then it only gets easier as the project gets further along. More deals are complete, more deals are on the shelf, more jobs are banked. All of it actually gets easier as time goes. So the shortest timeline, having the projects done, under construction, all the jobs done, and closer to a capital event, because if the projects are finished, able to be refinanced, able to have an increase in equity, increase in bandwidth for capital, that just makes it easier to refinance or sell any of those assets. And you have a really high chance of getting repaid. Also, corporate repayment guarantee on top of all of the regular performance. Having the corporate repayment guarantee adds another layer and more money to secure that loan. On years 4 and 5, it just gets easier and easier to get repaid because you have more projects finished, more ability to stabilize those assets. You start getting 2nd generation rents, 3rd generation rents on the earliest assets, which theoretically you'd be able to bump rent as they're full and there's excess demand versus supply. So higher chance because of the loan structure and the loan repayment guarantees, high chance of getting repaid in year 3, higher chance in 4, and a highest chance in year 5. And then we also do expect to have very little construction, very little competing supply, which means 2026, 27, 28, they're going to be great years for multifamily investment in the San Francisco East Bay. So again, I stand by that. High chance of repayment in 3, higher and highest in 4 and 5 respectively. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
One question here is about when does the 3-year investment period begin? And this is important from a partial payment perspective because many of our investors require that or request that installment plan phased investment approach. And the advantage again of that is that if it is feasible for you to have the full $800,000 funded in approximately a 10-month window, then you can conceivably file 10 months in advance. And with a partial payment approach, you can, if you're in the United States, you can still file your adjustment of status application alongside your EP5 petition. And you could still get the EAD card, the employment authorization document, work permit, in about 4 months after you file, even with a partial investment. And so, in this scenario, a person would fund around 200,000 or so at the time of file, and everything goes as normal, and then fund 6 to 9 months later. So the 3-year investment period would begin when you complete your investment 9 months later and the funds go into the project. So that it's just something to keep in mind as well, that in terms of that, when does that 3-year minimum investment period begin? It begins from the time that all the $800,000 is deployed and invested into the project.
Okay. There's a question about escrow and the use of escrow and escrow release conditions. And I thought this was an interesting question because escrow has had a very, very interesting relationship with EP5, different use cases. And now with the change in the RIA policies and everything else, escrow is, what you saw very, very heavily used in 2012 to 2013, 2014. This is when USCIS approvals for I-526 petitions were coming very fast. This is when projects were under construction. You could actually get the approval, wait in escrow, let the money out when everything was in place and you had zero risk on the USCIS actually issuing you a conditional green card. And this very short time frame of placing money in escrow, getting approved, releasing it, and still being a part of the project, that was feasible. You were able to wait in escrow. And then all of a sudden, USCIS started to get backlogs. They started to have huge stacks of files in the storage room. They were not getting to I-526 approvals for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And when they were waiting so long, the money was held in escrow, not at risk. the projects would actually get complete. The construction would finish, the job creation was over, and the money was never released because USCIS had not actually adjudicated. They had not actually approved the petition. So escrow actually became a problem where if you weren't released from escrow early prior to the I-526 approval, if you weren't put at risk and invested into the job creating project while job creation was taking place, you would have been denied. So escrow actually fell out of favor, and it fell out of favor not waiting for the I-526 and now today's I-526E approvals, but now is really based on more practical items based on a construction loan being in place, having the project fully capitalized, having the right guarantees, construction completion guarantees, the right covenants and restrictions. There's a whole list that we used to have in the escrow agreements that would make sure that if this money was taken out of escrow, if you went at risk, you were going into a project that has already started, was guaranteed to be completed, and your investment would eventually be secured by a completed asset. That's what we wanted escrow to do. We wanted escrow to stop you from jumping off a cliff. So now, when you have something like RISE, where all of the assets are under construction, have the senior loans fully capitalized, construction completion guarantees, and some of them actually already fully completed, you've actually already checked these boxes that would have been on the escrow account anyway. So the escrow account would actually just get in the way, add fees, slow everything down, and then actually delay you from starting your 2-year sustainment period, as well as starting your 3-year investment clock that comes with RISE regardless. So in any event, the purpose of escrow went away because of USCIS at-risk provisions. And then the protection of escrow was actually already satisfied in the work that we've already done in the way that we've structured the deal to begin with. So today, when you see people actually using escrow, you really need to look at the escrow agreement and what it's actually saying and what that escrow agreement is actually trying to protect you from. And is it a bunch of stuff that's already got check boxes and is already complete and or not relevant? Some escrow agreements would just say, okay, put your funds in escrow, and the moment you sign a subscription agreement, then we're going to let the money out. That doesn't really protect you. It doesn't really do anything for you except for some salesperson to be able to say, yes, we have an escrow. Yes, you're protected and don't worry. But it's like, what does it actually protect me from? Nothing. So wanting to read those documents and actually look at the details of what this stuff is supposed to do, how it does it, and does it actually do anything, that's the important part. But that's the story about escrow. And for our projects, we've already checked all the boxes of what the escrow is supposed to accomplish. We do not stand in the way of getting your processes started, getting those clocks running, and trying to get the money into the project, job creating, and out as fast as possible.
And just to add on that last point too, and this is especially important in the post-RIA world, the Reform and Integrity Act,
The fund administration.
post-RIA, is that, and not all projects have this. So we had a third party, we've always had a third party fund administrator, in this case, HC Global. We've always worked with a third party fund administrator. And this was really the best practice among the top regional centers. But not all regional centers do have fund administrators. And so we still have that in place. So the role of the third party fund administrator is to monitor the capital controls, monitor these accounts, and in some sense act like an escrow agent. So they know that the funds are coming in your name, and they're going out to the project in your name towards the project, and not somewhere over here and then back down this way. And so that in some sense is even stronger than your traditional escrow account.
Yep. Talking about we got an item here. Sorry, read ones that we already had addressed, but then talking about the minimum investment periods. When you talk about minimum investment period, you really have two timelines. You have immigration, and then you have investment. The immigration one is pretty simple. It's straightforward. It's a 2-year sustainment period from when you have the full $800,000 invested at risk into the job creating project. If you've actually invested all the money into the deal, that's when your clock is going to start. 2 years later, you're able to exit the project without threatening your green card. Then you have the investment timeline. This is going to be specific to your individual asset. individual project and what the investment terms are. Depending on the type of deal, they're going to need a certain length of time. They're going to need a reasonable schedule to be able to actually do any sort of pre-development, development, construction, and or operations in order to actually get to a point where you can feasibly exit without having some sort of artificial cash injection that would then reimburse you. So depending on your project, is it a realistic 3-year deal, 4-year deal, 5-year deal, or a 10-year deal? So for Rise, smaller, faster apartment buildings where they're actually already under construction with bridge capital, that's about as fast as you can get. Is 3 to 5 story type 3, type 5 construction. It's wood frame apartments. You drive down the highway in California, you see these being built everywhere. They're cheaper, they're faster. This is a low risk product. That is how we got to 3-year deals. Previously, we've done a lot of towers. We've done luxury residential. We did 1900 Broadway. We did the Grad. We've had a lot of other larger deals, and those were 5-year plans. But at that time, pre-RIA, your sustainment period was actually tied to your I-829 filing, which took about 5 years to get to when you were filing your original 526. Then you were trying to get approved, 485, adjustment of status, get the conditional green card, then wait 2 years for that conditional residency period, then file the I-829. That matched up. You didn't lose any time because of the project. You were waiting for immigration. Today, immigration and investment have been decoupled. Because of that, you can actually exit with your investment before the immigration items were finished compared to the pre-RIA policy. So we need 3 years to reasonably complete these smaller, faster deals. Somebody promising you 2 years in a construction world for any kind of major asset that's investment grade, I would say that's very, very difficult and not very feasible. And you should take a very, very strong look at what they're promising, how, when, and why. Going through this effort is really difficult for EB5. This is not easy. Putting together the entire 956 package, doing a capital raise, administering the deal. And if you're only holding on to low-cost debt for 2 years, the value of that effort is limited. If it's a 3-year deal, it's 50% more than 2 years. If it's a 4-year deal or 5-year deal, it's even more. So having interests aligned and having everybody be able to get where they want to go through the effort of going through EB5, you're going to want to see that alignment of interest. And for this project and what we're doing, the scale of it, the multiple assets, this is what we've been able to structure where everybody kind of gets where they want to go all at the same time. 3-year investment for Rise. There are extensions in the event there's some sort of economic reason that is needed, but 3-year for a target deal where 6 assets are completed, 3 more under construction. That is how we compress schedule. So hopefully I answered that question. Go ahead.
Since it is relevant to your comments here on minimum investment period and from an immigration perspective and on a project perspective, we have a question here about the IIUSA lawsuit on this minimum investment period and what the status is. So just to very quickly bring everyone up to speed, and I think we probably have some articles or previous video on this in our previous webinars, but just to highlight, as Colin said, post RIA for new investors, the minimum investment period is simply a commercial term now. As long as the job creation is completed, you've been invested for a minimum of 2 years, you can be repaid any point thereafter according to the terms of every project of the project, and every project's different and have different terms. Pre-RIA, as Colin said, your minimum investment period was tied to your green card and filing that 829 petition, having a green card for 2 years, which meant that it was different for everybody. By country of birth, processing times, it was different for everybody, but it was a minimum of 5 years for the most part. Now, there is a lawsuit filed by a EB5 trade association trade group called IIUSA that's has significant. If you just Google, you'll know the names of the regional centers of the in the board that are suing USCIS to try to change that shorter investment period and go back to a 5-year investment period. So we're not part of IUSA. We're not part of any of the regional center group that involved in this lawsuit, and we don't support this lawsuit. My recent knowledge, question is, well, what's going on with that lawsuit? My recent update on that is that USCIS has filed a motion to dismiss that lawsuit, and so there will be a now probably about 60 more days. They're going to sit there and write the written arguments back and forth, and probably schedule a hearing. So I don't think we'll have a hearing on that for another 90 days, and then it could be whenever the judge makes a decision on that. So we probably won't have a resolution on that lawsuit for another 6 months, in my view. Now, as I've told many of you individually, even wherever this lawsuit goes, like even in the worst case that USCIS loses the battle, they'll still win the war, because they just need to publish the rule and go through the public notice and comment period, and then publish this 2-year investment period. And ultimately, that's where this will end up. I'm certain, but it is it's disappointing. The whole reason for, not the whole reason, but in my interpretation, the reason for changing the sustainment period was, you bargain for, you choose a project for its investment term. And in the past, investors would find themselves invested for 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 years, if you're from China, with these backlogs, to no fault of their own and no fault of the project either, for that matter, because the project successfully completed and repays the EB5 loan. But the regional center and the partnership is not allowed to repay the EB5 investors. And so this gets rid of that whole problem of going beyond the original timeline, and
Effectively,
punishing investors for USCIS not doing its job.
Effectively, what Peter's saying is that IIUSA, in filing their lawsuit, was trying to actually set a floor for the minimum period that you'd be invested. You would no longer be bargaining the difference between 2 years for the immigration minimum, then potentially 2.5, 3 years, 4 years, 5, whatever the promise of a project would be. USCIS and IIUSA was trying to set a floor, and it would have leveled the playing field for everyone who was targeting, I guess, what their suggestion, Peter, I think was a 5-year flat floor. No matter what, it'd be a 5-year deal, meaning anybody that was trying to attempt to construct a 3-year project would then, for no other reason, would have 5 years of access to capital, and you would be not any more competitive than some other project that needs 5 years. So your competitive advantage by being more efficient, having less opportunity costs, and trying to build and exit faster than other projects are able to, it would just disincentivize you to do so. And however that turns out, and why that would be good for the market, or whether it's really just good for the plaintiff, all of that would play out. But like Peter said, they would maybe lose a battle, but they would win the war, because eventually they just go through the process of changing the rules the right way, through the APA, which all of us at Behring know a whole lot about, because we've sued using the APA as well, and everything else. So ultimately, it's probably going to be a non-event, and we don't even expect that lawsuit to really have legs. There's not really grounds for somehow forcing an arbitrary 5 years. It's odd, to say the least. Next questions. Talking about the rural GC, rural timelines, rural approvals. There are other RCs here. We'll look at this question here, Peter. Other RCs are claiming 2 to 5 year timeline for Indian investors in TEA projects due to backlogs and pushing towards rural. Could you shed some light on conditional GC approval timeline more recently for TEA? So I'm going to try and explain this in the simplest way possible. The reserve set-asides are very small. And that's on a per country basis. It's not really a 10%, 20%, et cetera. It's actually your 7% of 10% and 20%. It's minuscule on what the reserve set asides really are. No matter what, rural TEA for India, China, they've exceeded their minimums. It's not yet retrogression. You're still able to get EADs. You're still going to get advanced parole. Until you see a change in the visa bulletin, everything is current. That whole thing stays on track. All of this ends up in the same place because there's 10,000 visas that are going to get released every single fiscal year. And if there's a backlog, the next 10,000 visas comes in, wipes out some backlog. The next 10,000 after that wipes out lots of backlog, if not all of it. Whether you're rural, urban, everything else, there's a big, long calculated, kind of conclusion to all of this based on availability, visas, carryovers, and all this kind of thing. No matter what, that calculation is going to be very blurry. There's going to be a lot of gray. There's no black and white in whatever answers you're going to get from anybody. But rural, for that matter, if you look at it, like you are getting in line behind now probably over 1,000 other petitioners for rural that are already there. And China, India, both of those have lots of rural filers. You are not promised the same treatment that somebody that had an I-526E approved today. That individual may have filed over a year ago, and they were rural and they were promised priority processing. There's no rules for priority processing. There's no guarantee of fast processing. You'll see regional centers try to market the one approval that went quickly. But then if you ask them for a chart that actually says, hey, show me all of your I-526E filings when they filed and when they're approved, you're going to see the vast majority of those filings have not even yet been approved at all, let alone priority processing or approved quickly. So what does it mean? It means that in the end, you're going to end up in the same place where your sustainment period of when you actually need to be invested is going to be that minimum 2 years. Doesn't matter if it's rural, doesn't matter if it's HUA, you need to be invested for 2 years. What project you pick is 100% your choice, under your control. The sustainment period, that 2 years, that's under control. It's only 2 years. It doesn't extend. When you'll get your conditional green card is subject to a lot of numbers that you may or may not have access to, subject to a lot of petitions being processed and things like that. That is a moving target. It is a fast moving target that a lot of people have not been able to predict. So control what you can control. In the words of the late Nima Corpivara, one of our closest friends in the EB5 industry, we miss him dearly, but he put this rule out there: control what you can control. And that means make the decisions with the best information that you can. Do not listen to sales talk. Go ahead and look at what you can verify, and then underwrite the projects individually for the quality and the terms for what you need and what you want. What you can control is on your access to an EAD, advanced parole, the timing of your exit of the investment. You can make those choices. So, ultimately at this point, that rural GC and any timeline that you're being pitched or sold, that, I guarantee that you can poke a lot of holes in it if you dig hard enough. I wouldn't listen to a sales pitch on rural processing. The fastest way to unveil whether it's real or not, tell them, at first ask them, do other people like your project? How many people have liked your project and filed? Now show me their filing dates and their approval dates. And I guarantee they won't share that information with you, because the approval dates are going to be largely blank. So go ahead.
We have a few questions, or a few of the same questions, to kind of address, kind of looking towards 2025 with an incoming administration. And so we should touch on that a little bit. Obviously we've had a major election here in the United States, and a new Republican administration with President Trump coming in. And so the question is, what impact, if any, will this have on EP5? And obviously it's hard to predict, we're going based, my comments here would be based on what we saw in 2016 in the initial term. But first, let me start with this premise. is that the EB5 Reform and Integrity Act that was passed in March of 2022 extended the EB5 program through September 30th, 2027. So those are the terms and conditions of the EB5 program now. And if you're filing now, your application will be governed, will be processed under the rules in place, the laws in place at the time of your application. So that we're mid-cycle now, and that's the terms and conditions of the program as it is right now. If Congress were to, if any changes were made to the EB5 program, Congress would have to pass a new law, or USCIS would have to pass new regulations. Both are time consuming and especially in the terms of Congress, unlikely to move forward anytime soon. So this same law, the RIA, provides that if you file your application before October 1st, 2026, so a year before the period, the time when the EB5 program is set for renewal, then your application is protected, meaning USCIS must still process your application, and if you're approved, award you a green card, even if the program disappears in 2027. So if with the government changes and Congress says we're done with EB5, no more EB5, we're not going to renew it, you're protected because you filed before October 1st, 2026. Now, that's kind of the baseline. So we don't anticipate any significant changes to EB5. One, it just hasn't been on the radar of the administration in the past or now. Two, the family members of the administration have used EB5 in the past. In the Kushner family, they've had their own EB5 projects some years back. And three, there have been bipartisan support historically. Republicans and Democrats alike have supported EB5 investment immigration because it is investment, it's economic stimulus to communities, and it's a job creation program. So it has enjoyed or continued to enjoy political support in that respect by both sides. We have to wait and see, with the new USCIS or DHS secretary and the new USCIS chief, to see if there's any internal policies or practices that change. In 2016, we saw an increase in requests for evidence where there was greater scrutiny, and I think some prioritization on some scrutiny of source of funds, and especially coming from certain countries, and so that may occur again. But for our cases, like, we didn't really experience any negative impact on EB5 with our projects, our investors, in the changes of administration from these past several years, including 2016 to 2020. The only thing I see, or the one thing I could see in the short term that could have an impact on would be the EAD cards. EAD cards are issued for a 5-year period. This is the work permit. So you don't have to worry about renewing them while you're waiting for your green card. That was done by executive order by President Biden. And so executive orders, can be overruled or undone by subsequent executive orders by a new president. So if for some reason, this is not EB5 specific at all, this is immigration wide, H-1B or EB1, EB2, all these categories. So if a new administration could change the EAD validity period and go back to what they used to be. What they used to be was 1 year, and you had to renew this every year. So it doesn't go away. It just becomes a little bit of procedural headache to have to take the time to renew. But that's the only thing I can see that potentially could be more easily changed. But we don't anticipate any significant changes to EB5. Now we'll have to wait and see if there's anything, but nothing so far. Nothing's been on the table or discussed.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. The question here, talking about risk and talking about I-526E denials and the chance of getting repaid and all of these other things. Yes, there is an I-526E money back guarantee. This means that if you were denied I-526E for reasons of the project failing to meet its standards, et cetera, you would be repaid your capital and fees. Part of the RIA policy, 2022 legislation, everything comes out. There is a strict rule of deference. What this means is that USCIS is now mandated to defer to prior approvals when looking and adjudicating a new filing. What this means is that if there's an I-526E approval or the 956F for the project, then every investor thereafter is able to rely on that approval to expedite the adjudication of the rest of their case. Effectively, USCIS is only looking at your source of funds, meaning the project's already approved. At that point, the risk is on your source of funds. If you're using a high quality attorney, if you're using an attorney that has done EB-5 before and hopefully done it a lot, you are going to know if you have any sort of issues with your filing way before they submit it to USCIS. They are going to tell you if you have risk or how much risk as for your source of funds and being approved. You will make that decision on whether or not you want to file based on what your immigration attorney tells you. The project's already approved. You're not going to be denied because of the RISE fund and the RISE project and for any reason of our 956F approval. So the risk of getting denied because of us is extraordinarily low. That means that you really need to pick a licensed immigration attorney that knows what they're doing, and we can make those references. We can introduce you to people that have done thousands of these, but getting denied at this point in the project with 956F approvals in place, that is not something you need to worry about. That's not something you should waste a bunch of time and stress on. You should really start looking at the project and the investment side of it and really kind of starting to evaluate which investments you like due to that. The project has already been approved. You're good to go. That's probably the short answer. You don't have to worry about it. So looking at next questions, how do we get the money back? Talking about repayment and looking at the RISE fund and specifically multifamily construction. The projects need to complete, they need to lease up, they need to get to stabilize assets. And then from there, you're either going to have probably one of three scenarios. You're going to have a refinance from a bank where the equity in the project goes up, they refinance with a new mortgage, take the cash out and repay the EB-5 loan. The EB-5 loan then puts all that money back to its investors. There's also a recapitalization. This is when new investors come in and buy a lower risk completed asset, and it works the same as a refinance, except it's on the investor side and not the debt side. The result is the same. Investors get repaid. The last one is just a complete exit and a sale of the asset, and then those proceeds go to repay the EB-5 loan. So whether it's a refinance, recapitalization, or an exit sale, it all ends the same. The loan gets repaid. And then it can come from any one of the projects. It doesn't have to be all of them. You don't have to wait until the end. You just need to wait until any of those capital events and all of your conditions completed, your minimum investment term, as well as your sustainment period for immigration. When all three of those boxes are checked, that's when you're able to get repaid. It's part of the diversification story and lowering the risk and trying to spread out your exposure, not to one asset, but to spread it across 11 EB-5 deals and 14 total assets. So hopefully that answers that question. Talking about partial payments, looks like we answered those. Partial payments will still lead to EAD and advanced parole. You don't need to wait for I-526 approval on any of that. The Department of State will get started on issuing those cards the moment that you start filing the I-526. Looking at 526 petitions and job creation elements, give me a moment. If the program goes away, new visas won't be allocated to EB-5. So this is something to talk about. A huge problem for the pre-RIA world was the issue of grandfathering. There was 40,000 investors and billions of dollars in the system when the regional center program had allegedly expired. Those people were thrown into the wind by government. They were left on the side of the road. There was no way to a green card for anyone that was pending. That upset a lot of people, including us. We ended up suing the government over it. And that eventually, a couple of months into it, led to new policy where no one wanted to see the end of that lawsuit. And we got the RIA policy. So the RIA policy specifically grandfathers all petitions from any I-526E filer prior to the end of the 2026 fiscal year, I believe, maybe not the exact date, but 1 year short of the 2027 expiration. So you will be grandfathered. Anyone that files now, 2025, you're going to be grandfathered all the way into the end. And that actually is great news because the EB5 program itself has no expiration. What the expiration of that 27 is actually the regional center program. So if EB5 is still in existence, there's still going to be those 10,000 visas that are allocated every single year, all the way until there's no backlogs. Everyone's been issued visas. And China and India today are taking predominantly like the majority of filings, meaning that the rest of the world is never actually going to eat the entire capacity of 10,000 visas, especially when you're talking about years 2027, 28, 29, or beyond, which effectively means that anyone filing today within, call it a 5-year window, and all of these visas being released, you just have a whole lot of supply coming on board that would relieve any congestion and or backlogs that we see. But 2026, 27, you're going to see a different legislative environment. You're going to see a different tone about EB5. You're going to see a different tone about everything. It's going to be a different world. So trying to guess and, really looking at that crystal ball today about a 2027 item, probably a fool's errand at this point. But the EB5 program can't go away. Anyone filing today would be grandfathered. They would see the end of this process. There is no chance of cancellation. So at what point in 2025 are we expecting the dates to retrogress? This short answer is it's a fool's errand. There's a lot of moving targets, and that date is going to bounce around. We've talked about this multiple times on some of our prior videos, and definitely in our prior webinars, Peter. We've had discussions about dual approval codes. We've had discussions about the carryover visas and the allocation and the arbitrary decision-making of the Department of State on how they can actually move numbers into whatever buckets they want. The dual approval codes definitely muddies the water on a lot of retrogression. And if you guys don't know how dual approval codes work, I highly suggest you look into the work of Peter and the videos, as well as the blogs and the written content from Greg Sheehan, our former USCIS adjudicator. There is a lot to listen to and a lot to learn when talking about how USCIS and the Department of State are issuing these visas, and they're moving targets. So anybody trying to pick dates and tell you exactly when you're going to be approved, exactly when you're going to be issued a conditional green card, it is a joke trying to guess the date. We can give you pretty good descriptions on supply and demand and volumes, but picking a date, anybody telling you the exact moment, I'd like to hear it from them directly. See anything interesting out there, Peter? And for the rest of the crowd and everybody that is here with us, please put questions back into the Q&A. If we've missed it or if we haven't actually gotten to it, send us in there as a reminder.
And also too, just if we don't hit your question, because I know we're running over an hour now, but schedule a call or email us. Many of you, we've been chatting for a while. Schedule a call and email, and we can go over some of those questions if we didn't cover it here.
Yeah. Quick question about will all the investors get paid at the same time? If for the RISE fund, no, they will not. And that's by design. The EB5 investors are actually showing up all at different times. They all have different 2-year sustainment periods. They all have 3-year investment horizons that are coming and going at different times. We are actively managing and administering these loans on an individual basis. So the way that the money comes into the fund, there is a general loan, and then each individual asset has to qualify all of the conditions, the covenants and restrictions, its equity commitments, construction agreements, the GMAX construction contracts. Everything has to be in place for each individual asset. So when we're administering this loan and looking at each deal, we're tracking every single dollar in and when it comes out, matching that up with subscriptions and the timing of these sustainment periods and the investment windows. We're managing cash throughout this process the whole way. So an investor that came in right when we filed the 956s, which would have been in late 2023, they're working on a certain window and then trying to free up capital at the end of their 3-year investment horizons, where the capital is deployed into the projects is probably 2026, if not early 2027. Again, if you do partial capital contributions, your investment window is going to slide because you still have to have the full 800,000 invested into the project in order for your windows to start. So what you're seeing is a staggering of the amount of capital that goes into the projects and when, and that's actually causing a staggering of repayment periods and repayment windows. So it actually lowers the amount of cash flow that needs to be managed in any one period. That's actually by design. If you're trying to handle a big giant balloon payment of all 131 investors or whatever the count might be for the entire fund, it gets a lot more complicated. It's much harder for somebody to push out $100 million of capital on a one-time basis rather than managing a couple $1 million at a time. So the RISE fund was designed to be diversified. It was designed to have smaller projects and bite-sized chunks over a larger period of time and to offer that diversified entry and exit. So hopefully that answers the question, but that is on purpose and by design. And the reason you don't see that from other groups is because it's actually really hard to do. If you're not a real estate developer, if you don't have access to a portfolio of 11 projects that are all ready to go, all ready to be under construction, you are not able to pull that off. So ultimately, why you don't see it from other groups is because they can't. So that is the answer for that one. What else we got here? And again, sorry if we missed anything. We're definitely happy to answer things over email or try to catch up. But we're trying to do a good job covering the questions here. But hopefully you guys all found this useful and you found this informational and everything was satisfactory here. So please attend other events. And if you have suggestions or topics that you'd like us to cover, please send those over to us at any time. We'll produce the videos, we'll get the blogs out. We definitely want to try and figure this out for everybody and get the best information and most transparent processes we can out there. So Peter, if we don't have other questions for the group, just some Unity lender items, I guess, that are coming through. I guess for everybody in the group and the people that were looking at Unity lender, the one thing that we'll say is that the volume and interest for Unity lender has spiked and skyrocketed significantly. There is 4 times the volume that we were dealing with even just earlier this year. They are going through the applications. They are doing due diligence. We understand that everybody would like to see some things expedited and or improved. We hear you. We appreciate the feedback. We are expanding the team and working really hard on it. Unity Lender has just seen an extraordinary amount of demand, and that we expect to actually continue as time goes forward. But yes, please, if you need attention, if you need help, please reach out to your member of Behring that you've been working with, the Unity Lender team. We do want to make sure that experience is satisfying. So, just let us know when you need something. But yeah, again, Unity Lender demand is through the roof. There is a limited capital pool allocated for EB5 investor loans. So, it's going to become a supply and demand thing eventually, where Unity Lender loans, if we lend out all of the allocation for that quarter that was made available for EB5 investor loans, that's going to be an issue. So make sure that you do have high quality applications, you have the due diligence documents, and you put a good foot forward so they can actually process it faster. If there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of questions and Q&A and requests for documents that are missing, that will slow things down. Very similar to your source of funds report. So having that information available and well organized, that will only help speed up the due diligence process and issue faster approvals as well. So, if you need help, feel free to reach out. We're happy to do so. But we'll take the feedback from there. Okay. Well, Peter, if there is nothing else, we can conclude for today and pick up on the next webinar.
Sounds great.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And looks like we have an individual question. I guess we can answer here at the end, but we'll answer it on an individual basis. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And send your questions via email or call. Happy to help everybody. But thanks again for attending.